The MLB just screwed the New York Mets with brutal umpiring in the last game of the Yankee series that helped contribute to a loss and also helped the manager, Carlos Mendoza, get ejected. And it's not only Met fans that are in outrage, it's fans across the league that are in outburst at the decline of umpiring across the league, with this being a prime example on 4th of July weekend in the Subway Series, a big rivalry game. So we're going to go over all of this umpiring talk. We're going to go over who this umpire is and what exactly he did wrong in the Subway Series, only here on Mets Digest. I'm your host today, Mike Duda. I'll take you through everything, but first, we have to talk about some subscribers, and that being that 67.8% of you that watch these videos aren't one. So please, do me a favor, do us a favor here at Mets Digest, and hit that free subscribe button. That way, we can bring content to you about the amazing. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into this. And who is the umpire? Well, that is John Bacon, who has been an umpire since 2019. He took the home plate game in the last game of that series against the New York Yankees on July 6th. Mets ended up losing 6-4. And let's take a look at his umpiring card. Courtesy of New York Met News on Instagram, we have a couple of statistics to go over as well, thanks to them. So a big shout out to that channel. And look, this card is just really, really bad. Overall consistency at 88%. Look at that strike rate, 83% of strikes called rate. That is not good for a major league umpire. 92% overall accuracy. And look, he actually favored the New York Mets somehow, but his calls were just so pathetic, which we'll get into a prime example of it in just a little bit. At a key point of the game, those calls were just so bad, so inconsistent, that Met fans, in addition to obviously Yankee fans, are in outburst right now. In fact, it is the lowest consistency rating of the July 4th weekend. Out of all 45 games, this was the worst with John Bacon behind the plate, and it was probably one of, if not the most important games of the entire weekend. It's the Subway Series. It's the New York rivalry. It's two massive market teams that are playing each other and that have a history and a rivalry with each other. And you put John Bacon behind the plate, who is consistently not a good MLB umpire, which we'll hear from the experts in just a little bit of how he has consistently been poor. Really, MLB? Why? That is just ridiculous, not only to the Mets, but also to the Yankees. In fact, it was a bottom 10 ranking of all games here in 2025, and there have obviously been plenty of baseball games played. We are just about at the All-Star break, and this was bottom 10 according to that umpire card. It has been really, really bad. A lot of bad missed calls, but I think what's worse is why the manager, Carlos Mendoza, got ejected. Look at this. It is the bottom of the ninth. Luis Stearns is pinch hitting for Kodai Senga in the 9th spot. Mets have the top of the order due up. Pete Alonso is looming somewhere against Devin Williams. There is a possibility, if the Mets get 2 base runners or more, that Pete Alonso could hit a walk-off home run against Devin Williams again, like he did in the Wild Card Series against the Milwaukee Brewers. What does John Bacon do? He rings up Luis Stearns on 3 balls. Look at the zone. The zone literally says it itself. If it's inside that strike zone where there's the 9 squares, obviously it's a strike. All 3 of them are outside. First pitch is low. That's not a strike. All right, fine. You want to give it whatever. The second one is way worse. That is completely outside. And then after that pitch, Carlos Mendoza started screaming, and John Bacon came back and he basically said, "Stop it, Carlos, or else I'm going to throw you out." And then he makes an even worse call to end it. Look at that third one. Look at the third changeup. That is pathetic. That is so low. And it's also on the outer half. Why? How is that called a strike? How is this okay? This is not okay. This should not be happening in baseball. It is terrible. So Luis Stearns gets rung up on 3 really bad pitches. He gets angry as he heads back to the dugout. He has words for John Bacon, and given the way Mendoza managed that game, he only had a couple of guys left on the bench. He only had Travis Jankowski left, with Stearns being the 3rd pinch hitter of the game for the Mets. So obviously you need Stearns in there. You need someone to catch. You just pinch hit for the starting catcher. Now you have your other catcher being used, and he might get thrown out. So obviously Mendoza has to go out there and has to argue, and he flipped out. I love it. Although I disagree with some of the bullpen moves sometimes from Carlos Mendoza, I really, really like him as a manager. He gets fired up when he needs to. to, and he got ejected right away. It definitely said some of the magical words, but what I love is that he used his foot to draw a line in the dirt to basically show, hey, this is in the other batter's box. I love it when managers do that. I think that's awesome. I don't like the Yankees. Obviously, as you guys know, they're one of the most hated things for me in life, but I love Aaron Boone doing that. I think that's awesome, and I love when managers do it because umpiring has gotten so bad of late, and we'll hear that in just a little bit, specifically with John Bacon, but I can't even blame Bacon fully for 2 days ago game, for that game against the Yankees. Laz Diaz was also a problem, as you see on your screen. This is a clear drop. This was in the 7th with Francisco Lindor on base. In the bottom of the 7th, he was on first. Soto hits a nice shot to left field, and Cody Bellinger seemingly makes a really, really nice play. As you can see, it is clearly a trap. The ball clearly hit the ground, but they rule it a catch. And then Bellinger ends up gunning Lindor. It's a very, very nice play. Don't get me wrong. Props to Bellinger for the nice play. But it was a drop. As you can see, this is not a catch, and somehow it goes to replay and doesn't get overturned. I mean, that's just the lore of the New York Yankees. It feels like that is just inevitable to happen. But again, this is a ridiculous call. This time it's Laz Diaz, who clearly misses one that hit the ground. Look, he's trapping the ball. The white is hitting the green. The white of the baseball is hitting the green of the grass. That is bad. That's another blown call. Let's hear Francisco Lindor's reaction before we get into some more things from the experts, as Lindor actually talked about his base running, and he said that he made a mistake. This is what he was asked in the postgame when Steve Gelbs, who has the first questions, he basically said, that was a really unbelievable play. What could you have possibly done differently in that moment? And Lindor responded, quote, looked at Laz Diaz. Laz Diaz was the third base umpire. I looked at Mike Estabrook, who was the second base umpire. I should have looked at Laz because usually the closer umpire to the play is the one that makes the call. I looked at Mike, and by the time I turned around, it was a little too late. So, props obviously to Lindor. He is awesome. There's not many baseball players, I believe, that know the umpires' names, let alone knows what umpire to look at in a certain situation. Lindor's baseball IQ is incredible. He's obviously a great leader and a very, very good baseball player. But this is not a Francisco Lindor praise video. I've had a couple of those, especially when he got named to the All-Star team and an All-Star starter. This is a John Bacon video, and it's been history that John Bacon has caused problems. This isn't even the first time this year that he's done so. As we'll take a look at an article from about 2.5 months ago from April 18th titled, quote, MLB must consider punishing umpire John Bacon, end quote. It is by Jake Elman of Yahoo Sports, who starts off his article saying, quote, in an ideal world, we would not know John Bacon's name. We say that with no intended disrespect to Bacon, who made his MLB umpiring debut in 2019. However, even those atop the league office likely agree that it's never a good sign when fans focus on an umpire more than the on-field product itself, and he is completely correct. Why do you pay to go to a baseball game? Why do people pay for subscriptions to watch a baseball game on their TVs? They want to watch baseball. They want to watch umpires making really, really bad calls, and then we're sitting in reviews, and we're sitting in this, we're sitting in that. No, we want to watch baseball. We don't want to know the umpires' names. We want to know Francisco Lindor's name, Pete Alonso, XYZ, enter player. We want to know the player's name. We want to know the coach's name, the GM's name, not the umpire. The umpire is there to officiate and to make sure that no rules are broken and to be fair to both sides, not for us to know their names because they blow calls. And unfortunately for Bacon, this isn't the first time that he struggled. He struggled before. As Elman goes on to say, well, as more calls mount for Bacon's dismissal, the league must consider the unprecedented decision to remove him from the field, or at least prevent him from working behind the plate. Rarely in professional sports are officials suspended mid-season for blown calls. The TNM Super League, a Maui-based soccer league, banned 3 officials for several months, with 2 receiving 6-month suspensions after repeated poor performances. I'd love to see that in the MLB. But Major League Baseball has a similar problem on its hands. Bacon turned heads in last Sunday's Toronto Blue Jays Baltimore Orioles game, missing 17 calls, including 14 against the Orioles. And now, this is not recent. As I said, this article was from April 18th, so this game was a very, very long time ago. But it just goes to show this isn't the first time that Bacon has had a bad game. 17 calls, that is substantial. And 14 of the missed calls against one team, obviously that's biased towards one team. That is very biased towards the Toronto Blue Jays. I mean, that's pretty ridiculous. Now, you heard here about that Maui Soccer League where the officials were actually banned. Unfortunately, an umpire has never been suspended based off performance, but Ellman argues it might have to happen at some point. He says, quote, Major League Baseball, at least in modern history, has never suspended an umpire for performance. The closest incident came in 2013 when Fieldon Colbreth earned a 2-game suspension for a blown call in a Houston Astros-Los Angeles Angels game. According to CBS Sports, Colbreth's crew violated Rule 3.05 for allowing Houston to remove pitcher Wesley Wright before the reliever threw a pitch. Suspending an umpire for missing a rule is one thing. Punishing an umpire solely off performance, especially when the league is yet to implement the automated ball strike system, ABS, is another thing entirely, and it's a decision the Umpires Association would almost certainly fight. And with the association fighting it, you're likely not going to win. So likely, this isn't going to happen. John Bacon, as bad as he could be, as bad as he's been, will likely never get suspended solely off of poor performance. All right, it's not going to work. So now what? We'll turn back to Ellman as he says, quote, if the league can't outright suspend Bacon, it must consider preventing him from working behind the plate. And he explains why. And this is very, very good rationale, good reasoning. A missed call at second base can be overturned via replay. Can be overturned. Blown ball and strike calls can't, and it's directly impacting games. Major League Baseball is a business, and running a business means difficult decisions, obviously. The league cannot let Bacon continue working games without discipline, even if it's only limiting him to working the bases. And he is completely right in saying this, Ellman, because if you're working first, if you're working second, if you're working third base, whatever call you make is something that can be overturned. If you call someone out on a pickoff and he's actually safe, or vice versa, if you call someone out on just a regular play, if you say someone missed the bag, any of the situations that you encounter when you're in the field can be overturned. But when you're behind the plate, the only thing that can get overturned is when there's a play at the plate involving the catcher or the pitcher or something like that, and the ball is being thrown to the plate. Balls and strikes, at least at this current moment in Major League Baseball, cannot be reviewed, is not part of the review process, and therefore, if you're a home plate umpire, you have a chance to directly impact the baseball game in a negative way, a positive way. Some umpires do in a positive way, and props to them. They're great. But the ones that don't, the ones that negatively impact baseball games, something needs to happen. And John Bacon, unfortunately, is the perfect example. Now, moving forward, Rob Manfred, the commissioner of the MLB, he intends for ABS, automated balls and strike system. We'll turn to RJ Anderson of CBS Sports, who a little while ago said, Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred acknowledged on Wednesday that he intends to submit a proposal to the league's competition committee this offseason that would implement the ABS challenge system ahead of opening day 2026, according to The Athletic's Evan Drellich. MLB, of course, tested the ABS challenge system during spring training and had previously experimented with variations at the minor league level. The competition committee, created in the latest collective bargaining agreement, consists of 6 owners, 4 players, and an umpire. In other words, Manfred's push for the ABS challenge system should be able to pass regardless of how players and umpires feel about the proposal. That's a good sign, as this article was written in early June of this year. But Manfred is concerned about the players. It makes sense. He is the commissioner of Major League Baseball. A big part of his job is to make sure players are happy. As Manfred himself says, quote, my single biggest concern is working through the process and deploying it in a way that's acceptable to the players. There's always going to be things around the edges that we need to work through and whatever, and I want them to feel like we respected the committee process and that there was a full airing of concerns about the system and an attempt to address those concerns before we go forward. So, he's worried about the players. The question is, do the players have good feelings about the ABS system, or are the feelings negative? As Manfred goes on to say, I do think that we're going to pursue the possibility of change in that process, and we'll see what comes out at the end of that. The teams are really positive about ABS. I do have that unscientific system that I use, my email traffic. And my distinct impression is that using ABS in spring training has made people more prone to complain of balls and strike calls via email, to me referring the need for ABS. So very interesting. Based on his unscientific system, or whatever he wants to say, based on emails that Rob Manfred is receiving, ABS likely will not come. But if you turn to the teams are really positive themselves. And like we heard in the earlier quote, what matters is the teams, because it has to pass the committee, and the committee consists of players and umpires and obviously committee members that are part of the commissioner's office. So it'll be interesting to see how ABS is moving forward. But as for now, something needs to happen with these umpires, and we need to make a change. Is it ABS? Maybe. Is it something else? I don't know, but we need to make a change. So go down there in the comments section. Let me know, do you agree that the MLB needs an ABS system? Maybe you think there's a different way to work around the umpiring problems. Maybe you don't think there's umpiring problems at all. I know I personally do, based on Sunday's game. That's a prime example. Two teams that are rivals, they're going at it in the Subway Series, and it's obviously and clearly impacted by both Laz Diaz and John Bacon and the umpiring committee, as they're making poor calls on both sides. Not just the Mets, not just the Yankees. It's happening to every single team, but maybe you disagree. Maybe you think that umpires are fine. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section down below. Unfortunately, that's all the time I have for you in today's video. Thank you so much as always for watching, and let's go Mets.